He's the voice that's guided America through storms of news. From blood-soaked battlefields to the dazzling studios of CNN, Anderson Cooper, the last heir of the Vanderbilt Empire, was born into wealth, raised amid million-dollar mansions and the glow of fame. But behind that calm demeanor lie stories untold. A desperate letter he wrote to his mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, in his darkest days, left forever unanswered. A courageous choice in 2012 to publicly come out as gay, sparking a media firestorm and putting his credibility on the line during live broadcasts, from lavish rooms to the quiet pain in his heart. Anderson has navigated shadows that viewers only glimpse through their screens. The world's greatest storyteller. Why did he choose silence in the face of the challenges that shaped his life? What made him an icon? In both the light and the dark, Anderson Cooper earns millions telling other people's stories, but the story of his own childhood is one he's kept closely guarded. As an heir to the legendary Vanderbilt dynasty, he grew up surrounded by wealth and prestige, but behind that glittering facade, young Anderson felt only emptiness. What could make a child who had everything feel so hollow? Born in 1967 in the dazzling heart of Manhattan, Anderson carried the Vanderbilt name, a family that once dominated America with a fortune worth $200 billion in today's terms. Their name was tied to grand mansions, lavish yachts, and glittering parties that drew the elite. But by Anderson's time, that wealth had largely faded, leaving only a legacy and a heavy burden on a boy who didn't yet understand the world. He grew up in his mother's opulent apartment, where Gloria Vanderbilt, heiress, artist, and fashion icon, reigned. The place was filled with Picasso paintings, rare books, and dazzling parties attended by the likes of Andy Warhol and Truman Capote. But amid all that splendor, Anderson was often alone. He once said, "I lived in a museum where everything was beautiful, but nothing could be touched." Gloria loved her son, but she was caught in her own past wounds, leaving an ache in the heart of a little boy. In 1978, tragedy struck. His father, Wyatt Cooper, a gentle writer, the one source of warmth in that chilly world, died suddenly after heart surgery. Anderson, just 10 years old, watched his world shatter. At the funeral, he sat quietly, trying to grasp why the father he adored was gone and why his mother, lost in her own grief, couldn't hold him close. He later shared, "I felt like the whole world had turned its back on me." Few know that in those dark days. Anderson tried to reach his mother. He wrote her a long letter, hoping she'd understand his loneliness. But Gloria, swept up in her own struggles, answered with silence. That letter became a wound he carried quietly for years. Yet the night after the funeral, under a starry sky, Anderson made a promise to his father. "I'll make you proud, Dad, with a life that matters." That promise changed everything, but could a 10-year-old boy, bearing the weight of the Vanderbilt legacy, turn grief into strength? How did Anderson overcome loneliness and prejudice to rise to the top? Picture a Yale student, no press pass, just an old camcorder and a fake ID, sneaking into a war zone. That's not a movie, that's how Anderson Cooper launched his career. After graduating from Yale in 1989 with a degree in political science, Anderson turned his back on every privilege the Vanderbilt name could offer. The lavish Manhattan apartment, the high society parties, he left it all behind. ABC News passed on him, and no major network gave him a second glance. But Anderson, driven by a promise to his late father, refused to give up. He started as a fact-checker for Channel 1, a small news outfit that aired in schools. The work was dull, but he saw an opening. He'd carve his own path. In 1990, Anderson forged a press pass, grabbed a tourist camcorder, and headed to Myanmar alone. Right as the government cracked down on student protests, he filmed bloody demonstrations and sent the tapes back to Channel 1. Those grainy but raw clips grabbed the nation's attention, putting the unknown young reporter on the map. "I didn't want to be the Vanderbilt heir," he once said. "I wanted to tell real stories." In 1994, in Rwanda, Anderson nearly lost his life amid gunfire. He witnessed genocide, villages littered with bodies, in one moment. He stopped filming not out of fear, but out of helplessness in the face of such pain. "I cried for the starving children dying in front of me," he later shared, in that place of utter tragedy. Anderson realized journalism was about holding on to humanity, not just reporting the news. While his Yale classmates hobnobbed at Manhattan galas, Anderson lived simply in Hanoi, learning Vietnamese to hear people's stories firsthand, as if to escape the Vanderbilt shadow and the loneliness of his childhood. He pressed on to Bosnia, Somalia, South Africa, never shying from danger. The question wasn't what news he was chasing, but what emptiness from his past he was running from. The turning point came in 2001, when CNN hired him as a correspondent. By 2003, Anderson Cooper, 360 Degrees was born, a platform where he told real stories with raw emotion. No one called him the Vanderbilt heir anymore. From a rejected rookie, he rose to the top of American television. But away from the studio lights. What's Anderson's life like? Success doesn't fill every void, he once said. Could the glow of CNN ever heal the wounds from that lonely Manhattan apartment? Success didn't come to Anderson because of his name, it came from the pain he'd lived through, and he turned that pain into strength on the airwaves. In 2003, after more than a decade reporting from war zones, Anderson Cooper, 360 Degrees, was born, on screen. He didn't just read the news like a script, he told stories with the heart of someone who'd seen the world crumble firsthand. That's why his show stood apart, as crisp as a newscast, but as warm as a memoir. In 2005, when Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans, while other reporters covered it from a distance, Anderson was there on the ground. In a now famous moment, he interrupted a senator trying to spin the situation, then turned to the body of a young girl floating in the floodwaters. He wasn't angry, he just quietly asked, "Who's going to answer for this child?" That scene silenced America. From that moment, Anderson wasn't just a reporter, he became a voice for those no one else heard. Soon after, he joined 60 Minutes, won awards like the Peabody and Emmy, and became one of the most trusted faces on American television. But that success didn't come with red carpets or shiny new sports cars. Anderson rarely shows up at glitzy events and has never lived like a celebrity. When the cameras turn off, where does Anderson go? And if he's not chasing glamour, what really shapes his life? After more than 2 decades reporting from dangerous places, Anderson Cooper has built a fortune worth over $60 million, but instead of living like a TV star, he's chosen a humble home, a former fire station in the heart of Manhattan, and in that place, he's found a peace that fame can't buy. In 2010, Anderson spent $4,300,000 to buy a 3-story building in Greenwich Village, once a fire station from the late 1800s. It used to house fire trucks racing into snowy nights, its bells ringing whenever someone needed help. Anderson, who's chased crises across the globe, felt the place had a soul. He kept nearly all its original features: high ceilings, an iron spiral staircase, the metal fireman's pole running through the house. The brick walls are unpainted, the old wooden floors are cleaned but not polished. The house doesn't try to be luxurious, it's a living space with history. The living room is flooded with light, decorated with black and white photos, his parents, a few war zone scenes, his eldest son's first smile. A long wooden table holds half-read books. His workspace sits by a window, where he writes books or reviews notes at dawn. There's no fancy decor, everything is simple, quiet. The top floor is where Anderson raises his 2 sons, Wyatt and Sebastian. Light wood, low bookshelves, hand-woven rugs, no TV, just windows opening to the New York sky. He wants his boys to grow up not in a pretty house, but in a place worth remembering. The kitchen is near the old fire truck entrance. Anderson has no private chef. He cooks for his kids simple dishes like boiled eggs, salmon, vegetable soup. Dinner is always the 3 of them at the wooden table. No phones, no TV blaring. "I grew up in an apartment full of art, but empty of feeling," he said. "This place doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs the people I love." Beyond New York, Anderson owns a retreat in Trancoso, a quiet fishing village on Brazil's southern coast. The house is tucked among trees, built with local materials: clay walls, palm-thatched roof, wooden shutters opening to a garden. No air conditioning, no heat, no cable TV. By day, he reads on a hammock strung between palm trees. At night, oil lamps glow instead of electric lights. No alarms, no schedules, no cell signal, just the sea breeze and his sons calling for Dad. Trancoso isn't a luxury getaway. It's where Anderson pauses to remember who he is, not as CNN's Cooper, but as a father, a man craving quiet. In a world where real estate screams power, Anderson chose a place that once put out fires to nurture his life, and a hideaway in Brazil's jungle to keep his heart from growing cold. What about what he drives is that just as understated? Anderson Cooper could own any car in the world if he wanted, but he drives a gray Mini Cooper S, small, modest, and unlikely to turn heads. It's an oddly simple choice for someone who's reported from the middle of gunfire. With a net worth over $60 million, Anderson could easily have a fleet of luxury cars, a Rolls-Royce Cullinan, a Bentley Flying Spur, or an Aston Martin DBX worth over $200,000. Instead, he drives a newer Mini Cooper S, priced around $35,000, a car thousands of Americans drive every day. No chauffeur, no security detail trailing him. Anderson drives himself from home to his son's school or CNN's offices. Passers-by sometimes recognize him, but most of the time, he blends into New York's crowds like any other local. "I don't drive to show who I am," he said. "I just need it to get me home." In truth, Anderson loves classic design. In an interview, he once admitted a fondness for the Aston Martin DB5, the iconic James Bond car, worth millions in pristine condition. He considered buying one to restore, but ultimately passed. "I'd rather admire it than own it," he said. "I don't need more things to prove myself." For him, what gets him around should reflect humility and practicality, not status. His Mini Cooper S is a two-door, automatic, with a minimalist interior, no flashy extras. It's enough to be a dad, get to work, and stay under the radar. One of his deepest memories about cars isn't about engines or price tags, but feeling. Anderson once took a cross-country road trip with his mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, when he was young. No private jets, no hired drivers, just an old sedan, a paper map, and hours driving through the sweltering South. "It was one of the rare times I saw my mom truly laugh," he recalled. "We didn't have anything fancy, but we felt free." Some buy cars to step into the spotlight. Anderson drives to step out of it, and every time he turns the key, he's leaving CNN's fame behind to be a father, a man no need to prove a thing. So, in his everyday life, with the cameras off, how does a day in Anderson's world unfold? In his 50s, with a fortune in the tens of millions and a top spot at CNN, Anderson Cooper's days are surprisingly quiet. No parties, no bodyguards, no roaring supercars outside his door, just morning coffee, a few books, and two little boys calling him Dad. Anderson wakes at 6 in the morning not to head to a set, but to make breakfast for his older son, Wyatt. Almond milk, boiled eggs, toast sliced in half. He doesn't let a housekeeper take over. "I want my kids to know what a normal morning tastes like," he said in an interview. After dropping Wyatt at school, he heads home and spends a few hours reading the news, not online, but in traditional print, like the New York Times or the Atlantic. He jots notes with a fountain pen, underlining key lines, a habit from his Yale days. On days he's not on air, he stays home writing books or recording his podcast, All There Is, where he shares stories of loss, healing, and compassion. His daily spending doesn't scream celebrity. He shops at local markets like Trader Joe's or West Side Market, picking out fresh vegetables and salmon. No stylist tagging along, no one carrying his bags. He chooses his greens, grabs Greek yogurt, and waits in line like any New Yorker. His downtime is just as simple. Instead of fancy gyms or exclusive sports clubs, Anderson jogs along the Hudson River, listening to instrumental music or classic recordings by Leonard Cohen or Bob Dylan. Some evenings, he takes his boys to a nearby park, playing soccer or reading on a public bench. To those used to seeing Anderson's serious face on major broadcasts, the sight of him pushing a stroller, strolling in a hoodie and faded jeans, might be a surprise. But that's the version of himself he loves most. No lights, no microphone, no interviews. Just a man living up to the promise he made as a boy, to live a life that matters. Some need an audience to feel complete. Anderson just needs his two boys running toward him after a long day. And in those moments, he knows he's truly made it. But can such a quiet life stay untouched by storms? Can someone who's seen the world break avoid scandal, pressure, and loss? He's one of America's most recognizable TV faces. Yet Anderson Cooper almost never speaks publicly about his personal relationships. And as a father, he's chosen to raise his kids alone quietly, without drama, with a steady, unshakable presence. Anderson has never married but had a long-term relationship with Benjamin Mazzani, a French nightclub owner in New York. Though they parted ways in 2018, they remain close friends and co-parent their two sons, Wyatt Morgan Cooper, born in 2020, and Sebastian Luke Mazzani Cooper, born in 2022, both through surrogacy. In a rare TV moment, Anderson said, "I lost my dad when I was 10. I don't want my boys to go through that." So, he and Benjamin live in adjacent apartments, raising Wyatt and Sebastian as an extended family not bound by marriage, but by love and duty. Anderson doesn't employ a full-time nanny. He tucks his boys in each night, reads them children's books, shares stories of his parents, and teaches them to fold their clothes. On his personal Instagram, he posts little beyond everyday moments: Wyatt on the wooden staircase, Sebastian grinning in overalls, or the two of them piecing together puzzles under the glow of a lamp. Beyond family, Anderson quietly supports charities, especially those for LGBTQ+ causes, cancer research, and disaster relief. In 2010, he went to Haiti after the earthquake not as a reporter, but as a volunteer, helping medical teams deliver supplies. When asked why, he said simply, "I can't stand sitting still." In a world where people talk more than they do, Anderson chooses to live quietly by what he believes. No lavish wedding, no flaunting his kids, but every action carries his full presence. A man who raises his sons alone, stays friends with an ex, and lives simply amid fame. Can he sidestep all controversy, or does his very quietness make him easier to misunderstand? When scandal erupts on live television, many celebrities crumble over a single misstep. But Anderson Cooper is different. He holds his ground, keeping the trust of millions of viewers. The man who started his career with a fake press pass in Myanmar in 1990, risking jail to tell the truth, still lives by the same principle: trust is the most valuable asset. In 2012, Anderson co-hosted CNN's New Year's Eve countdown with comedian Kathy Griffin. Amid the cheers and dazzling lights, Kathy made a crude joke about stripping on air. Anderson froze, his eyes betraying disappointment. Millions watched. The clip went viral. The American Parents Association demanded both be fired. "I wasn't angry at Kathy," he later said, "but our audience deserves more respect." Anderson quietly apologized, distanced himself from Griffin, and accepted the loss of a friendship to protect his credibility. "When you represent a news network, trust is all you've got," he said firmly. In 2016, while moderating a debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, Anderson faced accusations of favoring the Democratic candidate. The media split, and viewers criticized him, but he didn't dodge the heat. "Fairness isn't giving both sides equal time," he responded. "Fairness is asking what needs to be asked." That candor solidified his image as a journalist who doesn't bow to pressure, even under the brightest spotlights. But the deepest wounds didn't come from the public. In 1988, his brother, Carter Cooper, took his own life in front of their mother after years of battling depression. Anderson, just 21, stood by helplessly. "That was the moment I lost my youth," he wrote in 2019. His mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, an icon of high society with her lavish parties and Picasso-filled rooms, passed away. Anderson didn't hold a press conference or make a spectacle. He shared a short video, thanking those who stood by his family, like a son clinging to one last memory. While many celebrities use the spotlight to mask their pain, Anderson, at 55, chose a quiet corner to launch his podcast, All There Is, in 2022. No glitz, just a microphone and raw stories. He opened up about his mother, the first man he loved, and living with loss. "We don't have to get over pain," he said. "We just need to keep it from stopping us from living." The podcast became a bridge, touching millions of hearts. Anderson has never shouted to be heard in a noisy world. He earns listeners with his steadiness, integrity, and choice to live kindly, even when everything falls apart. "I don't tell stories to get attention," he said. "I tell them so we can understand each other better." But after it all, from wars, scandals, and funerals, What does Anderson Cooper leave behind? Is he just a storyteller, or has he become part of the history he's reported? From the battlefields of Somalia to the CNN newsroom, from a son who lost his father to a single dad, Anderson Cooper doesn't just report the news. He's used his own life to tell a story of resilience, kindness, and quiet strength. With Anderson Cooper 360 degrees, he doesn't just deliver headlines, he asks questions for those who have no voice, like during Hurricane Katrina in 2005, when he cut off a politician's excuses and pointed to a child's body in the floodwaters. Who's going to answer for this little girl? No shouting needed. He brought the whole country to a standstill. In 2012, he came out as gay. No press conference, no grand announcement, just a simple statement, "I don't want to stay silent about what matters to me." From that moment, he became a role model in the LGBTQ+ community, not for being bold, but for being steadfast. Since 2020, Anderson has taken on a new role: fatherhood. Wyatt and Sebastian, the two boys he co-parents with his former partner, are growing up in a converted fire station with home-cooked meals and bedtime stories every night. "I grew up without a dad," he said. "I don't want my boys to go through that." In 2022, Anderson launched his podcast, All There Is No Fancy Microphone, no background music, just his steady voice sharing stories about his mother, his brother who passed away, and the first man he loved. These weren't stories meant for applause, but they touched millions of hearts quietly carrying their own pain. Off the air, he supports charities, from disaster relief to cancer research, always under the radar, not out of duty, but out of empathy. Anderson's legacy isn't in titles or awards, it's in how he listens, engages, and chooses to live in a world full of noise. Have you ever risen above loss, like he has? If so, share your story, because sometimes we're all living our own version of Anderson Cooper.